Yeah, to me, you can't put the technology and the gadgetry in their hands. But I also think it comes from a parenting philosophy. I think it's important that as a family, you regularly discuss, and I talk about this in my book too. What are your family values? Like how are you explaining to your kids what an education is? Not just in the classroom, but in the world through sports, extracurriculars, watching TV, walking down the street, going to museum, having conversations with friends. What is an education and how do you define an educated person? What are your goals? And if you have that kind of family mission statement, then these answers to questions about technology and what kind of grades should you get, what kind of extracurriculars should you pursue, how should you spend your time, what do we spend time doing as a family? What happens when your kid says, I'm bored? If you have a mission statement as a family, then you have a place to go back to reflect on the answers.
You're currently listening to Teru Clavel. She is an education expert, columnist, and sought after public speaker. Since 2010, she has run her own education consultant practice, advising globally minded families on a range of issues that includes multiple language acquisition, school choice, and how to enroll their children in U.S. universities. Teru has written columns for the Japan Times and the Financial Times, and she's made appearances on CBS This Morning, CNBC's Squawk Box, and Channel NewsAsia. I'm excited about my conversation with Teru, so let's get this thing started, guys. Let's get after it. This is Your Superior Self, episode 78, World Class, with education expert Teru Clavel. What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. I am Trey Downs, and I want to say thank you for taking the time to download this episode. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, please leave a rating and a review and hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. It really helps me scale the show, and I really do appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much. Oh man, it's early. It is 4 a.m. on the East Coast, and I cannot sleep, so I figured I'd come downstairs and knock out some episodes for this show. This is what a side hustle looks like. This is what the effort looks like, is me, 4 a.m., bedhead, pot of coffee, and raspy voice. I love what I do. I love being able to come on here and talk to you guys and connect with some great people like Teru Clavel and talk about my passion, which is one of my passions, which is parenting. I don't have all the answers, but I love to connect with people that have experience in education that can help me see other perspectives and learn about new techniques in parenting. And one of the questions that I asked Teru in the interview is, what do you do when your kids continuously ask for cell phones? Like, what is the age that you kind of allow that? And she has a great answer. But before I dive into the interview with Teru, I wanted to read an excerpt from my favorite book, The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. And in this part of the book, he says, when you truly awake spiritually, you realize you are caged. You wake up and realize you can hardly move in there. You're constantly hitting the limits of your comfort zone. You see that you're afraid to tell people what you really think. You see that you're too self-conscious to freely express yourself. You see that you have to stay on top of everything in order to be okay. Why? There's really no reason. You have to set these limits on yourself. If you don't stay within them, you get scared, you feel hurt, and you feel threatened. That's your cage. The tiger knows the limits of his cage when he hits the bars. You know the limits of your cage when the psyche starts to resist. Your bars are the outer boundary of your comfort zone. The minute you come to the edge of your cage, it lets you know it in no uncertain terms. And the reason why I read that was because I want you guys to realize that you have to continuously push yourselves. You have to continuously get outside of your comfort zones, because that is where the growth happens. You have to be uncomfortable out there. It's when you put yourself out there and you become vulnerable to new experiences and new people is where you start making new connections. You might get burned or something like that, but that is also a learning experience, right? Like every new experience has something to teach you. And I think that we need to start pushing ourselves outside of that cage that we get comfortable in, and start learning new experiences and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And to help me talk about getting outside of our comfort zones, I have Teru Clavel joining the show to talk about her new book, World Class, which is a mother's journey halfway around the globe in search of the best education for her children. Our conversation is so free-flowing, and it's very cool because it seems like you're eavesdropping in on a conversation between two strangers. And I also wanted to give you a heads up because my baby girl is definitely in the room. But I left that in there, and you can hear a little bit. Well, you probably can hear a lot, but I wanted to leave that in there because I wanted to show to you that sometimes you got to juggle, and sometimes you got to make sacrifices to get things done that you really want to do. I love podcasting. I love this whole side hustle aspect of it. And sometimes you just got to put the work in, and you got to juggle kids and your side hustle. But that's all a part of the journey. And we grow each time that we conquer a certain obstacle and certain challenge. And this is definitely a challenge for me in this episode, is trying to keep her quiet while I interview Teru. But it's all about the journey, and life is chaotic and it's crazy, and it's not always perfect, and you gotta love it for what it is. It's life. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Teru Clavel. What's going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. Tonight I'm joined with Teru Clavel, mom, author, world traveler. Teru, I want to say thanks. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Trey.
So why don't you go ahead and explain to my audience what you're up to today? I know you just launched a book. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so Simon & Schuster imprint, Atria, published my book. It's called World Class, and it just came out last week. And it's about how I raised my 3 children in the local public schools of Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, and then Palo Alto. And now we are back home in New York City. And I did that from 2006 through today. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Like, what sparked that idea to be able to do that?
Well, that's a great question. Let's see, in 2000, let me go back. So I was basically a trailing spouse. I followed my husband's career, and he got this great offer. At the time, we had 2 kids in 2006, and they were both in diapers, toddlers. And it was one of those things where it was, okay, well, at that point, I had left my job. The most recent thing I'd done was I'd hosted a TV show for HGTV. I was an interior designer in New York City.
No way.
And yeah, and I love that work. It was so fun. But then I got pregnant and had kids, and I kind of thought, okay, once they're out of diapers and maybe in preschool, I'll go back to work. But then my husband got this job offer, and it was a great opportunity for us to take off and have this wild adventure in Asia. So that kind of what took over. And then from 2006 to 10, I was raising the kids, and I had a 3rd child. And then in 2010, for work again, we all moved to Shanghai. And basically, it was then when I thought, okay, my kids are kind of old enough, and I can do something else, and I really wanted to. So I went back to school, and I got a master's in comparative and international education, because at that point I'd already enrolled my kids in the public schools of Hong Kong and Shanghai. So it seemed like I needed the academic side to my personal experiences. And I speak Japanese fluently. I'm half Japanese. It's my first language, and I have family in Japan. So this kind of international education stuff wasn't totally foreign to me. So to answer your question, how did World Class, my book, come about? In 2013, at that point, we had just moved to Tokyo in 2012. I started becoming really interested in writing. And for years, I'd taken writing classes online or in person, anywhere I could. And this kind of seed was planted that I have to start writing articles about education. And then I got this idea that I had a book to write. And only when I got back to the United States in 2016 did I really believe I had the real idea of what kind of a book I needed to write, because I needed to compare the school systems I was in, or my kids were in, to the United States system. And at that point, I had a master's in it, and I was a journalist in education. So I had kind of built enough credentials to do so, I felt like.
When did that, like, do you remember the spark, the moment when you were like, I need to write about the international school systems?
Well, actually, yeah, I flew into San Francisco from Tokyo in the fall of 2013, and there was this seminar called the Op-Ed Project, and it's basically to empower, at the time, mostly women or marginalized kind of demographics within the United States to speak up and to write articles. And so it was a 2-day program, and at that program, there was this editor there named Brooke Warner, and it had never occurred to me to write a book. And she was a book editor. And she was talking, and I thought, wait a minute, maybe I have a book to write. Because at the time she's a memoir editor, and she was using it was Eat, Pray, Love as a model. Like one woman travels to 3 places and she has a book and a story to write. And I thought, wow, that's kind of me. I have Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Tokyo. Maybe I can write a book too. And so that's really what got me thinking. But again, it didn't really materialize until 2016. And then I sold the book proposal to a publisher. It went to auction, which I was really lucky about.
That's amazing. I love that
Yeah.
story. One thing that I do want to unpack is how you said you were kind of like following your spouse, and what was it? What was the term? Trailing parent or trailing spouse or something like?
Trailing
Yeah.
spouse. Yeah, trailing
So
spouse.
talk about that. Like how? I mean, you hear about the traditional father goes out and finds work, and the mom stays home and does the whole house thing, taking care of the kids. Like as a you know, the type of mom that you are, the author, you had aspirations of doing bigger things. Like, did that ever like hit you where you were kind of like, man, what am I doing? Like, I want to do things for myself.
Oh, for sure. It was something that I grappled with a lot. In 2000, let's see, we arrived in Hong Kong in 2006. And then in 2007, I really wanted to pursue like a fashion design line or something involving design because that was my background. And I started that business, but then we felt that the recession was coming in 2008, and it's probably the worst time to launch a fashion business because, it's like a extra expenditures and luxury. So people are going to cut back their spending and they're not going to spend money on fashion kind of a thing. So that dream kind of fell away really abruptly, and it was really, really hard for me. And so maybe instead I had my third child in 2009. I mean, maybe one replaced the other, who knows? Um, but then in 2010, again, we moved to Shanghai, and I'm not really, I've never been really open about this, but I had a health scare the following summer, and it was kind of this wake up call where I thought, okay, now is the time. And that's when, within a month, I enrolled in a master's of science in comparative international education program, and it was online, so I could do it from Shanghai. And Trey, I'll be totally honest with you. I thought this was going to be a program where, yeah, maybe I'll read an article once a week, and maybe, yeah, it's like really taking it like it was a joke. And it was such a rude awakening because I don't know, I read 30 to 40 academic articles a week. I was writing multiple papers a week. I had my dictionary out. I was so low tech at that point. And I was in Shanghai, so the internet didn't even work that well, that I was like relearning how to use everything and downloading. And, the first term I was printing everything even. I didn't even take notes online. And it was the learning curve, I should say, was tremendous. Um, but it was my health scare, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I can do more with my life, and I want to, and I have a bigger calling, I guess I should say.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people have those moments where it leads up to that, right? Like you're busy, you're in it, you're being a parent, you're staying at home, and staying at home and being a parent is a lot more. It's way more difficult than what people give credit to. And then you have some kind of life scare like you're talking about, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like what am I doing? Like, it's not that you don't want to stay home with your kids. It's just like you have this inner calling for something more, right? Like, create your own success. And you went back to school, did a master's program. Like at any point you were talking about how difficult it was for you. But like, did you ever feel guilty that you were, taken away from your kids and your husband?
It's a good question. I felt like I was doing something that was so important for me and something that was so important for my children to see. because at that point, and I talked to a lot of my female mother friends about this. When the kids say, "Oh, mom, you're not that smart," or "You just stay at home, you just do the laundry, you cook and clean for us," kind of a thing. When a lot of these moms, and they're very, very educated women, and even if they're not highly educated, they're very smart. And there's something I think about the society that we're living in, some kind of a social construct whereby a mom, just because she's not out there making money, may be construed as not being productive, where there's plenty of research to show that the intelligence of the child is directly correlated to the parent that's at home raising them. So it's really hard to balance. But going back, I felt like I was role modeling for my children, how an intelligent person can function in our society and within the family. It made me proud, and there were times for sure. I mean, I would maybe embarrassingly admit that I would wear pajamas and put on a long winter coat and take my kids to school, and then I'd come back and stay in my pajamas, and then I'd do the same thing at pickup. And my kids would be like, "You're still in your pajamas, mama?" That kind of thing. But, I'd wear winter boots and a winter coat so you wouldn't really see. But they saw me working really, really hard, and they saw that I was passionate about something. And, almost 8 years later, they see I have a book, and I think it makes them very, very proud.
How cool is that to be able to show your kids your book that you've written?
That I have to say, there were separate times with each of my children, and now they're 15, 13, and 10, when I caught them either reading drafts of my manuscript or the final copy. And I didn't ask them to read it ever. But then I would catch them reading it and they couldn't put it down. And each of them individually would come to me and say things like, "Mama, you're such a good writer. Mama, this is so good." And other times, because they're in the book, they'd say, "Really? That happened to me?" Because they don't remember because they were so little. So it's nice. It's really,
That is awesome because like you're gonna live on forever through word form. Like your
yeah.
grandchildren are gonna be able to read this book and say that's my grandmother, and that's the kind of way I look at the podcast. Like this audio is gonna live forever, and my grandkids are gonna be able to listen to this, and I think it's such a cool concept.
Oh my gosh, I never even thought of it that way. Thank you. I love that. Thank you. That's so cool.
So tell us, like you've seen the international classroom, like so for people in the United States that haven't traveled outside of that, like what are some of the big differences? I know that's a generalized question, but like what are the top three differences that you see in the classrooms throughout the world?
Let's see. Well, I would say the first shock when I put my kids into a public school, and that was in Hong Kong in 2007, was just how bare bones it was. In fact, the school that they attended was nicknamed the prison because it was made out of basically concrete cinder blocks with like this open courtyard in the middle at the top of a hill. And I think it had barbed wire on the roof. And it was so bare bones, but you know, it was so obvious where the money was going. It was going into the teacher training, the teacher salaries, and whatever the kids needed to learn. But there were no, you know, football stadiums, bouncy seats, like none of this extra stuff. It was exactly what the kids needed and very intentioned spending. Um, and that was a real shock for me because I wasn't used to that. Let me see. I would say if I had to pick something, two other things, I would say the learning expectations are so high, and every child meets those learning expectations. So in Shanghai, my son, who at the time was in first grade when we first moved there, he was kept after school. And my Mandarin was so spotty then there's no way I could communicate with the teacher to find out why he was still there. And it really got me upset because I was thinking he's only in first grade. Why is he getting into trouble? Why are you making him stay? And it was a complete misinterpretation because basically the kids are required to get a 95% or higher to pass the arithmetic quizzes that they're given on a regular basis. And he didn't pass that day. So the teacher kept him after school, was teaching him until he learned. It wasn't a detention. It was just everybody has to learn. Everybody puts in the effort. You may learn it at a different time, but this is how we do things. And, fast forward when they compare 15-year-olds, let's say from Shanghai, Singapore, and Japan to US 15-year-olds, they're literally 2 to 3 years ahead in math. And then, when you look at our US colleges and our grad students in the grad programs, a majority of the students who are in the STEM fields are from Asia, and that includes India. And so I feel like those high learning expectations and how you implement them is tremendous. And I would tag on to that. There's like a can-do mindset. Nobody's bad at math. Nobody's not a reader. Everybody is. It's just that's what you do.
I love that. I love that. I actually got lucky enough to have a foreign exchange student come live with us. He
Oh
was from
wow.
Thailand, Bangkok area. Yeah. So my senior year in high school, he came and lived with us, and brilliant was he
Mm-hmm.
in chemistry, all things
Mm-hmm.
math. Obviously he had a pocket translator for English and things of that nature, but I mean, it's great. Like math is universal language, right? Like, I mean, everybody knows. I just feel like, and when I went over there, I visited his school. And one of the principles that they taught and just drove home was
Mm-hmm.
mathematics, right? Like the idea that you really have to have patience. Like mathematics teach patience, and that's like one of the forms of respect over there. It's crazy. I don't know enough to get into their philosophy, but like it was just crazy watching these kids learn chemistry, AP chemistry level stuff, and then mathematics. Like you said, they're like 2 to 3 years far more
Yeah.
advanced than we are. I just think because they have that patience, I just feel like that. I feel like our culture doesn't practice enough patience.
I think so. And it's also perseverance, right? In these countries, they don't look at a kid struggling and think it's a bad thing. That's an opportunity. Here it's like, oh, it's too hard for you. I mean, I don't know how many teachers, because in the 2017 to 18 academic year, I traveled across the country and visited classrooms, legislators, administrators, education scholars, education conferences. And I heard repeatedly, oh, the kids don't have to learn their multiplication tables anymore because everybody has a smartphone. And yeah, if they don't want to, then they can just write a poster about why math is important. And if you actually believe that, that's that you're handicapping those kids because you can't even go to the grocery store and figure out what 10% off is in your head
Or go to a restaurant, right? Like get the 50% tip.
or anywhere, right? Really basic things or if you're driving a car and how much the gasoline is, and your gas mileage and your efficiencies. It's like these are things that you shouldn't have to pull out a phone to calculate because the reality is your, counterparts across the world are doing this in milliseconds while you're, minutes behind because you got to find your phone and input the information. And it's like, it's no wonder.
When's the last time you used your phone for a tip?
Um, It's a good question. It's a really good question because, I feel like I'm really intentioned. I feel like if I start doing that, it's like the black hole that has no end. So, I got to keep my mind sharp. I'm not in high school anymore. So I force myself to do these calculations.
I'm good until we get to like the 1783, little lunches there, and then it's like, all right, give me the cell phone. I'm just gonna calculate it.
That's
Give me
so
a nice
funny.
round number, 20 bucks. Yeah, I don't have to use it, but 1783, I gotta use a calculator.
Yeah, that's not a good number. That's a hard number for sure.
Yeah, but you're right though. I feel like like our culture gives up too much, right? Like when we feel that resistance, when we feel that uncomfortable feeling of slight failure, it's like that trigger point, that tipping point where we're like, I'm not doing this. I'm not good enough. Like, and I think that if we just hung in there a little bit longer and we kind of got comfortable with the uncomfortable, that I think that would be more successful in different areas in our
For
life.
sure. I mean, life is not easy, right? But it becomes a whole heck of a lot easier if you can figure out how to overcome challenges. And right? I mean, it's we're presented with challenges and we have to make decisions all the time. But if you don't have kind of a manual on how you've succeeded in the past, everything becomes really, really difficult. And what I find is really interesting in the United States too is we're a culture that is obsessed with sports, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we love our professional sports. It's a pastime. Everything is, every sport you can name probably. And what I find so interesting is where do we push our kids the most on average? I feel like it's on the sports field, right? The coaches can yell at the kids. They can make them do laps if they're not, behaving or if they can't do something the right way. They can make them dribble or shoot or do all kinds of things. But we can't do that in the classroom for some reason.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with you 100% because I feel like I don't know, that is crazy. Like I just thought about that. Maybe teachers are scared now just because of like what the parents would say. I don't know. Maybe it's just different kinds of kids that are associated in the classroom than on the sports field. I don't know.
I think a lot of that, all of that applies. And it's teachers have their hands tied behind their backs because they can't really reprimand kids. It's not like if any teacher said, "Oh, you couldn't get these grammar rules right. Sit in the corner and study them for 5 minutes." That's never going to happen. But kind of like on the soccer field, if a coach says, run 5 laps, because you're horsing around or whatever, it would be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I feel like those kids that are on the soccer field too are like they want to be there, right?
No, it's a really good point. No, it's a valid point because you think about cultivating that love of learning and how do you do that? Right? And for whatever numerous reasons, kids, adults, you go on that field and you're like, you're trying to win, you know? And there's like such a great rush, an adrenaline rush when even if you lose, right? If you worked really hard and put in that effort, it still feels really good, right? If you're on the sports field or you're on the tennis court or whatever it is, and you lose, but you didn't really put much effort in, you feel like really, really bad. But it's why can't we translate that necessarily to the classrooms where we can cultivate this love of learning? And I would argue that it's because nothing is more motivational, I feel like, than overcoming those challenges and building that resiliency because and those are the underpinnings of lifelong learning, right? But if we intervene so much in our children's learning and helicopter them and don't let them struggle, it's a problem. And so an example that I discuss in my book World Class. There was a Chinese student who came to the US for high school, and she'd been educated in Beijing until then. And she said when she was in Beijing, her homework in math class would be A plus B equals C. And then for homework, she would get D plus E equals what? And she said in the US, in school, right, they would learn A plus B equals C. And then for homework, they get the exact same thing. And I feel like it's really true. It's not like you're stretching the kids. Your learning expectations just have to be higher. And I think there's a great balance between, love and support with challenge. And you have to have that balance because love and support doesn't mean coddling your kid and giving them A for effort when they haven't mastered the material.
I don't know if it was on a podcast or in your book or something that I read that you had written or talked about failure, right? Like allowing your kids to fail.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, right? Like, I mean, if you never let your kids to fail, I mean, I think we forget that, right? Like your kids are trying, like my daughter right now, 7 months old, is like learning how to crawl, and you have to allow her to fail. You have to allow her to fall down and get the bruises because that's how they learn, right? That's how they grow.
I believe that completely. And, and there's this architect that I interviewed, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I love this story. He's a Japanese architect, and he built this kindergarten called Fuji Kindergarten. It won countless international awards, and it's in the shape of like a UFO, a donut. And the roof is they saw that the preschoolers run on average 3 miles every day because of the circular shape of the roof. And some people look at it, especially from the West and with building codes here, they'd say, oh my gosh, that's so dangerous. There are trees growing through the buildings and there are slides going from the roof to the ground floor and there are dirt mounds everywhere and there are nets. And the thing is, when he came to speak, I asked him to be a speaker at one of the schools that I worked with. And he said, if you don't let your kids break an arm now, they're going to break their heads later.
I love that. I love
right?
that.
But the gasp in the audience of Western parents was audible. They're like, oh, and I thought, wow, this guy really has something because yeah, you can get a hairline fracture in your arm and then you kind of learn, I'm not going to do that again, or you may do it again. And then hopefully you learn a deeper lesson. But, as an adult, if you don't build those stepping stones to resiliency, then you're just going to make bigger mistakes. And like you said, you're going to break your head, which today I think we see the teen anxiety and depression rates not only skyrocketing, but they're starting at much earlier ages.
Yeah, it scares the crap out of me because it's like my kids are right on that cusp where they're asking about cell phones and stuff like that, and I totally think that it's the depression in younger, not adults, but younger teenagers and adolescents is because of social media and cell phones and texting and bullying and all that, and it's like I don't know what to do about it because like I've never had to experience that. Like when I was growing up, I think I was a senior in high school before I got my first cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that our generation of parents and our kids are struggling with for sure. And, Nobody, I don't know any parent who knows what they're doing, frankly. And I was on the Today Show last week and I was really surprised because they asked me a question I didn't know they were going to ask me. And the co-host asked me, so what is your tech rule in your household? And I kind of looked at them like, okay, we're going to go there. So I was like, okay, because the female host, said, well, your kids are probably not on their computers or gaming all the time, are they? And I didn't know what to say because no, they're not. I think maybe they would like to, but my 15, 13, and 10-year-olds don't have smartphones. And, and maybe it's been a little bit of a struggle for them socially, but at the same time, their default is not technology. These kids these days, their default is when they're bored, oh, then I'm just going to go to my phone, I'll social media, I'll play games and that kind of stuff. Whereas for me and my family, our default is we always pick up a book.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What do you think the right age is for like cell phones?
I think as soon as they show they have the self discipline and the responsibility to manage other areas of their lives, right? Then they can get a smartphone. I think to me, it's kind of like, are they doing their homework? Are they getting good grades? Are they showing up on time? Are they bathing? So my kids wear glasses. So I kind of use this analogy. Are they old enough to be able to wear contact lenses and not get eye infections and be responsible, because if they can't do that, then I'm not going to put their brain onto a smartphone.
Oh, I agree because I keep telling mine 21, but they're like, come on, dad.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. By 18, I think they can probably go out and get their own contracts.
Well, yeah, it just scares me because, like I said, I don't really know. This is the first time being a parent, and it's like, I just don't know how to deal with that, right? Like, I mean, it's not the old times where, you got it in your face all the time. You got, kids texting each other. I mean, how do you really police that?
Well, so yeah, to me, you can't put the technology and the gadgetry in their hands. But I also think it comes from a parenting philosophy. I think it's important that as a family, you regularly discuss, and I talk about this in my book too. What are your family values? Like how are you explaining to your kids what an education is? Not just in the classroom, but in the world through sports, extracurriculars, watching TV, walking down the street, going to a museum, having conversations with friends. What is an education and how do you define an educated person? What are your goals? And if you have that kind of family mission statement, then these answers to questions about technology and what kind of grades should you get, what kind of extracurriculars should you pursue, how should you spend your time, what do we spend time doing as a family? What happens when your kid says, I'm bored? If you have a mission statement as a family, then you have a place to go back to reflect on the answers.
I love that mission statement as a family. What is yours?
It's, for us, it's everything is a learning opportunity. Go outside of your bubble and always put forth your best effort. I'll never get upset with my kids if they're honest with me and they put forth their best effort because people have strengths and weaknesses. Things come naturally to some people and things don't come naturally to others, right? So sometimes you just have to work harder than the person sitting next to you. Doesn't mean you can't do it.
I love that. That is some good stuff right there. Um, what 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 do you want people and readers to get out of your book? Like, what if they read it one time? What would be the main message that you would want them to take away?
I'd say, our kids can do so much more than we give them credit for. And I saw that in my own kids because they went to schools where, in some cases, they were the only non native kids. So my son in a Shanghai school was the only one who was not Chinese out of almost 1,000 students. And it happened repeatedly, but they persevered. They became fluent. They were at grade level for reading and writing in a very, very short time. And I think it's because not only did the community, the teachers, the other students, and the parents of the other students really support my kids' efforts, but at home it was, you can do it. You can do it. Whatever you need, I'm here to support you. I won't do your work for you. I'll never do that, but I'll support you with whatever you need. And sometimes that included getting kids from the local college to come spend time with my kids and sit with them and talk to them, read to them in those languages so that they could catch up.
At any point in your career or even your journey, like were there any times where you felt like you wanted to give up? And if so, like what kept you in the fight?
Oh my God, there were probably so many times. Let's see. There were times when, you feel like you have, and the writing process is really interesting, I feel like, because There are times when I felt so excited about an article and I'm going out and I'm doing investigations and in interviews, and then I write the article and you're like, it's going to hit the paper tomorrow, and you have a full page feature and you're so excited. And then it hits and like it's like a pine cone fell in the forest. Like, wait, nothing happened. Like the earth didn't change. You know what I mean? And it's like it's this interesting buildup, this euphoria. And so now I have to remind myself it's usually more fun before than after, you know? Um, but then there have been times when I just don't want to write about anything. And then I wonder, oh my gosh, I've hit a dead end. Um, but I was given some really, really, I think, amazing advice. And this has carried me through. When I have those times when I feel like there are lulls or I'm waiting for responses or people to pick up whatever I'm trying to say, a good friend of mine told me it's what you do in that lulls that sets you up for success later. So use this time to process, to think, to lay down the strategy for your next steps.
Whenever I put something out, like a podcast and or a blog or anything like that,
Yeah.
the more that I try to push it, the more that I try to bring more attention to it, I feel like the less justice I do to it, right? I feel like if I just put it out in the world and I'm genuine and authentic about my message, like, and I don't have any expectations of anything in return, that's when it's most successful.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be intuitive, right? In your gut, you know what's right. I really believe that in developing that intuition and really working on it is crucial to any kind of success. Otherwise, you know, begging and crying for attention and forcing things on people, nobody wants that. And you know, the bottom line, and my editor told me this too. She said, the best thing you can do to focus on any part of this journey in your book is create a really good product. Because if you have a good product, people will read it and talk about it. And you know, and it's true, and it's really true. And I will admit I love my book, and I'm really proud of it. Um, you know, because there's stories, right? If you want to hit, for example, something that has come up is, you know, how do you make a bestseller list? And there are plenty of people out there who will buy whatever thousands of copies of their own book to make a bestseller list, right? But the reality is, if you do that, nobody's reading your book. Nobody's buzzing about it, discussing it, sharing it, recommending it. And the only way to have longevity as a book is for people to do just that. So you have to focus on getting a really good product.
Yeah, I like that because it's like, you find success when you're not looking for it.
Yeah, and something that my mother always said, she's in the real estate business. She said, and she's, you know, first generation Japanese and really fresh off the boat, even though she's been here for almost 50 years now. She thrives on her Japanese accent. She's like, you know, Teru, you know, the best job is one where you make money while you're sleeping, you know, and she's always said that to me. And, you know, it can be true to a certain level, but it is interesting, right? Because if you have a good product that sells, it's selling while you're sleeping.
It's selling more than once, right? Like, so if you're,
Yeah.
in construction and you build one home, you sell that one home. But if you're an author, you can sell, you have potential to sell many books.
Yeah. And these days, really, authoring it's not lucrative unless you're J.K. Rowling, you know, or some of these other prolific and very popular writers, or authors. But the book these days is really a platform for building other things. And that's what I really hope to do with my book. Although I do love my book. Please buy it and read
Well, it's a part of you, right? It's your It's like your
it.
fourth baby.
Really
You know what I
is.
mean?
It really is.
So what do you want your legacy to be for, like, your
I
children?
think what they see in me, I'm kind of a fighter. I'm one of those people who, if I see someone I want to go talk to, and I just go up to them and talk to them because I have something important to share with them. Famous person, not famous person, and I actually have a pretty good circle of friends because of it. And you know, my book is the beginning, hopefully, of creating a change or affecting change in education in the United States. And we have so much to learn from each other within our country and from other countries as well. So, you know, if this grows into other media opportunities, you know, a docuseries, a documentary, I have a children's series coming out about globalization and global competence and understanding diversity, that kind of stuff. And and I want them to look at me as a role model. It's like if you have a passion and you believe in something, go after it. Because it's really natural for me. I don't think of my work as painstaking at all. Even the stuff that probably is really painful, I don't think of it that way. I love what I do.
Man, that's awesome. Like I think it's like 80% of the people that are out there in the career world like don't love their job. So you're like in that
Yeah.
20%. Like that's insane. Like what is it to like wake up and like jump out of bed ready to go into work and get your, get your love on for your job?
It's I feel very, very fortunate. Um it's just really empowering, because I don't feel, at least yet, I don't feel parent guilt at all either. I don't feel like, oh, I'm spending time on this, because I feel like I am being a good role model. Of course, it's a balancing act. But I include my kids in as much of my work as possible. So if I'm writing an article or research something, or even a part of my book, or if I'm pitching an idea to someone, I ask their opinion. I ask their inputs, because they were in the schools where I learned a lot through them. And it's amazing how much they know. I mean, I'm always floored by my 10-year-old daughter. She gives me like the best advice. It's kind of funny that way.
Where are they going to, well, you don't have to tell me whether, are they in the States now going to school?
Yeah, yeah. So they were in New York City, and they go to school in New York, which starts next week, which of course they were hemming and hawing about a couple of hours ago. But yeah, they're in school in New York.
Are they excited to be in the States? How long have they been in the States long as far
Yeah,
as
so
going
it's
to
been
school?
yeah, so they just finished up their third school year, and I think they really like it. I mean, this, and I kind of think it's amusing, because I think it's been the easiest for them, because now speak their first language in school, right? Because in the past it's always been Mandarin or Japanese, and now it's like they speak the home language at school. It's a much easier thing, and they don't have to juggle multiple languages, which they were having to do before.
Which one's their favorite country to go to
Oh,
school in?
that is a great question. So my daughter would say her heart is with Japan. I don't know if she'd say it's her favorite, but she loves Japan. And still in the summer, she goes back to school and goes to school in Japan, because they go to school through July. So when she finishes up at the beginning of June, she goes back to the school she attended, and she goes to school there for 2 more months. I mean, it's regular school. It's like a regular public school. It's not camp or anything. And it's homework every day and studying, and she loves it. I would say my boys are probably, they're 15 and 13 now. They probably are happy to be in the US, and it's different. Like they're on sports teams, and they like, their extracurriculars, and they get, a little more freedom. Yeah.
That's awesome. How can people connect with you and get your book?
So my book is for sale on Amazon and at Barnes and Noble, at hopefully your local independent bookseller. It's called World Class: One Mother's Journey Halfway Around the Globe in Search of the Best Education for Her Children. And I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. And then my website, it's www.teruclavel.com. And I love having conversations with educators, parents, legislators, administrators, anybody who cares about educating our next generation. So please, please reach out to me. Even, if you have a question about parenting, about school choice, my book is full of lots of takeaways, like actionable things you should do when you research a school, when you talk to teachers, how you should look at the curriculum, and and it's full of lots of stories. I found that the best way to tell my story was like 50% anecdotes and 50% research and takeaways. So hopefully it's full of information that'll be helpful.
Taru, I could talk to you all night. This has been a
Oh,
great conversation.
thank you so much for having me. You asked some great questions. A lot of food for thought for me as well.
I want to say thanks to Taru for being patient and being a great guest. That was amazing for me because I had my little one with me and she was cranky. And Taru was great. She was a great guest. She was patient and she was very kind and she was understanding. Very rare do you get those types of guests that don't look at you like you have one eye when you have a child in the background and you're trying to get an interview done. It's just, she's just so genuine. So make sure you guys go check out her book, follow her, look her up, do everything you can to support her. She's a great person. If you like this episode and you found it to be of value, please head over to yoursuperiorself.com and sign up to get on my email list, have all of my episodes and blog posts and news about the podcast sent directly to your email. That way you don't have to worry about hitting subscribe and having to go through your apps to find the episodes. I'll send that over for you. I'll do all the heavy lifting. So guys, I want to say thanks for hanging out with us today. Thank you for downloading. If you have a moment, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. It helps me scale the podcast. And you can check me out on all social media at Twitter at Downs Trey, Instagram at TDowns80, and on Facebook, Trey Downs, DOWNES. Check me out over there and send me a message. I want to hear from you guys. How are you guys doing? What's going on? Connect with me because I love connecting with you guys. All right. Thank you, and I will talk to you later.